Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is a bit of an unusual one because this is going to be a show we're going to cover over two areas here over in the Game Dev Local podcast. And we've got Harry over with the Gaming Playbook. For those who don't know me, I'm Oscar Clark, he, him pronouns, and I'm on a pod quest to learn everything you want to know about game dev, but never dared to ask even. I also have been around in the industry since 1998, working on everything online, PC, mobile, and console. I've been a pioneer in all that spaces. I wrote a book on game as a service 10 years ago, and I've just finished a book on game economy design. I'm also the chief strategy officer for a thing called Arcanix, which is a new technical platform for the decision making around live ops games. And I do a lot of work. Things like lightning lessons on live ops. So I've been around forever talking about games and live ops and things like that. My limit of love of everything to do with making games has no bounds. Harry, tell us all about what you do and your podcast.
Yes, please. And thank you for the intro. Great. So, for everyone who doesn't know me, I host a podcast called The Gaming Playbook, which we share a kind of similar mission. So, in my tagline, it's getting the people who have never been interviewed before with the playbooks to uncover the playbooks that kind of made them so successful. So, the vision with our podcast is it's the gaming playbook. So, we do one topic at a time, and each podcast is like a page in that playbook where someone can go learn something. And yeah, my background was in gaming recruitment. I was placing Unity developers across studios in the Europe. And then to do that, did a lot of podcasts and realized I wanted to go solo and kind of do this my way. So in April last year, I started a marketing agency, and now we brand CEOs in the games industry. So I've been behind around 2,000 posts now total, which includes my content and also a lot of the CEO content. So I've been interviewing people in the games industry for their LinkedIn content and for podcasts. And I love to put on a party, bring people together, and ultimately allow conversations to happen, whether it's through an event, through social content, or a podcast like this.
And you've done an incredible job. I've seen you at so many shows recently, in particular, normally wearing the One Piece hat.
I have it. It's in the corner, but
Exactly.
it doesn't fit in the frame.
It doesn't fit. But the thing is, this is why I have to wear this thing. I mean, I think we should explore this whole area, like you say, the idea of CEOs in particular, but more generally, people who are trying to establish themselves and their identity in the space. I think let's talk about kind of the why that's important and some techniques. And obviously, this is something very close to my head, given that since about 2011, when I became a Unity evangelist, I put on the hat. And I say that in that way because there are regular events where people will tweet out saying that he saw someone else wearing a top hat and it wasn't me, and that's not right. I've managed to turn up at events I wasn't even physically at simply because somebody talked about somebody wearing a completely different hat. And to my mind, I mean, again, I know I'm kind of launching us into this, but there's something about the idea of owning an identity, owning a space that becomes something where you are the go-to person that's thought about with that topic area. Is that the kind of area you're thinking about when you're talking about kind of empowering these CEOs to have an identity?
Yeah, for sure. So I had a mentor way back when, and his whole thing was hating on Crocs. It was like one of his angles of unison building. He had a mentor tell him, like, why do you talk about watermelon so much? He's like, you know what, I'm going to use it. And he described it as universe building. And I think it's very important because when you're writing or sharing your story online, if you are only known for the subject matter and we replace the face and I don't know anything else, that's a risk,
Yeah.
right? Because they're not buying into who you are. Now, if we take the hats aside now, for example, the reason I started doing the hat and I feel like I'm cursed to keep wearing the hat is because it worked. Because what ended up happening is I was doing my normal post on LinkedIn and I did a post about luck and how to get lucky. It's kind of, you can do things. For example, if you're fishing, if you cast a bigger net, yes, you might not get anything, but eventually things will happen. And I explained how it would work. But the image was me in an elevator, and I happened to be wearing that hat, which I got at a Dubai Expo. Then half of the engagement was about the hat. And the post did better. I was like, all right, note to self, wear the hat more. And then the next week, I went to a conference and wore the hat. And then within the first day, a few people said, oh, nice hat. They chanted the One Piece thing. I've never seen One Piece. And what ended up happening is I was attracting people.
Yeah.
And then I wore it at the next conference, and then it was actually very practical. It's easy to find. So then I've now, anytime I go to a studio tour, I hide the little hats places, and it's kind of become a thing. And it
and
made
it's
me realize.
no,
Please
I was
say.
going to dive in there because I think this is a kind of like an area we can kind of explore a bit because it's not about the hat, it's about the hook. And I mean, yes, a hat. I mean, there's a great line. I think it was an old ad that you want to get ahead, get a hat. Was I think an old kind of like line. I can't remember what the ad was for though. But the point being that having a hook, having again that you could assume that the guy in the hat, that you all you are is the hat, and but what I've managed to layer with the hat by being a Unity evangelist, stood on stage with an outline that was recognizable at 1,000 paces. It meant that I could not go to a GDC and move more than 100 yards, and somebody, a game developer, would self-identify. They would come up to me and they would talk about something relevant to me. I have a terrible memory. To have that shortcut happen is fantastic. It's
So
such
practical.
an opener, so practical, like you say.
Yeah.
But everybody has a different way of pulling the hook. So, like you say, I think you're right. I think it's the hook that allows people to shortcut the identification that makes the difference.
And to make this hit home for people at home, like to make this really tangible. So my bread and butter is posted on LinkedIn, telling the story to facilitate a conversation.
Hmm.
And that happens in a couple ways. You want to be building trust with your content,
Yeah,
to know who you are, your values. But the main thing people think about is the authorities. Like, am I an expert in this space? When you have more of your personal story in, and the hat is an element of this,
yeah,
it allows you to be a bit more, when it comes to the authority content, it just makes it less dry. I don't know how else to say it because they
good.
know the person behind this message, and it adds up. It really adds up over time. Like people will, for example, like someone gave this example. If Elon Musk did a tweet and said, "I'm taking a shit," it would go viral because of Elon Musk. If we're writing content on LinkedIn and no one knows who we are, versus someone who knows us for maybe some of the stories we've shared, the fact that they've seen the hat all the time, they might stop and
Yeah,
like, you know what, I'll click see more because I've seen this character before. It's just all these things add up. And we're not saying everyone to wear a hat, just to be very clear. It's just more of the
it's
fact that
mine. Stay off the hats.
it's just to be cognizant of the fact that
Yeah,
these world building activities make sense. And I'll end with this. Someone mentioned when it comes to like the bubble of LinkedIn help, right? Someone said, "You're the only person I see."
yeah.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Because he saw me in person doing things, being more alive, smiling in my photos, little stuff like this. He saw me as a real human, giving advice from his actual story." So when you have these kind of real life elements or the little things, people really attach to that, and then they can stick around for the journey and the story and for the person behind the advice.
No, no, exactly that. And I think this is critical because, like you say, it's the hook which you build layers around. And I think trust is a massively important factor there. I mean, I think most people who will recognize me will know that I have a passion for indie game developers. You'll probably also know that I want to talk about the practical reality of the techniques of making games. You probably won't have a clue of the kind of games I've worked on, and that's actually inevitable because most of the stuff I've worked on I'm under NDA, I can't talk about. But that's the life of a consultant. But on top of that, you'll have a sense of the kinds of conversations and range in which I've had those conversations because you'll have probably seen me on stage at an event or on a webinar. I might be moderating it, and what's fascinating about that is the role of expert. And what I find one of the biggest lessons I learned very 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 early on is that people assume their expertise in you quite a lot. You've got to be a bit careful about this. But the reason I think it's interesting is my first proper kind of difficult, scary gig, I had to talk to the Royal Society of Chemistry in London. Okay, big, prestigious bunch. We wanted to use their software. They had all of the nutritional labeling information. Sorry, they had all the nutritional information. We wanted to put it in labeling automatically. Historically, you had to basically use, experimentation. You had to actually break down chemically all of the components of a piece of food. And my first job we worked out a way to do it as a computer program. And I'm going up there having failed dreadfully my A level in chemistry, going to the world leaders, the global leaders of chemistry, and they didn't understand computers. So I was the expert. No, I don't. I didn't go into anything in their sphere. I'm just to be clear. I didn't try to pretend any of their knowledge because I would have been found out very, very quickly. But what they didn't know is the thing that I did, and I think that freed me as a speaker, freed me as somebody doing business development, freed me as somebody engaging generally, which is having a true understanding of what you know, and importantly, what the listener is interested in finding out, and keeping that truth in that process. That's the thing that made a massive difference for me. And I think that, I mean, again, I'd love to know what you think about that. My feeling is that that's what we're doing. We're putting a frame by putting a hat or putting an outfit, or there was a ad company that made everybody wear orange trousers. You recognize them instantly across the street. Really effective. But that's a frame, but you've then got to fill that frame with something factual, something believable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because I've been thinking more recently about what people actually need to hear. And the most common thing from people who I want to work with, right? These are CEOs, people who run games businesses, some for like 30 plus years, but they're afraid to post on LinkedIn because they don't want to feel like, oh, what do I have to share? And I feel like they're connecting the thing that they're going to put out there with their self. And I want to give the example of the way people have been trained on public speaking has cursed everyone because the way it does it because
I'm
basically they
laughing,
say,
but
oh, here's a topic.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
Like in the school system, they teach you basically here's a topic you don't care about, learn
Yep.
about it, and then for something you're not passionate about and you have to memorize, you're then going to talk about it in front of all your friends who typically aren't very nice because they're young and kids, and you basically have one go at it, and then you probably do no shadowing,
Yep.
and then you get a score on it, and then you're like, I'm never doing that again.
No.
And then I think people take that frame sometimes for the rest of their life. So yes, that applies to public speaking. But like the first time I did public speaking, a lot of people said, "Oh, well, you're not worried." And I'm like, "Well, I've been talking about this stuff on video calls for the last year. I just did it in person, just without someone asking questions for 15 minutes. All I did was just repeat the stuff that I keep repeating on calls. So if you're truly talking about something you are an expert in, that's all they're going to see. Like the people in the chemistry situation, they did not see you for Oscar, the person who doesn't happen to know chemistry. They just saw you for your expertise. I think that people really misunderstand that you are not putting your entire self out there. You're not going to be graded as a human being. You're just going to be graded based on what you say. And a way for everyone to shield themselves is to always say, this is how I've done things, or this is how my clients have done things, and I hope this is useful. You don't have to preach the be all and end all of game dev or the way you do things. But if you share what you know, knowing that that is a shield, because no one can tell you, well, that didn't help you. It's like, well, it did. And it might help someone in a similar situation. So to make this tactical for people, like if you're going to be doing a talk or going to do a LinkedIn post and you're afraid of the backlash, just know that that's like, you don't need to be, because you're not going to be putting your entire self out there. You're not going to rewrite the book on this stuff. You're doing it one step at a time. Like I think it's really important to have that frame, like you said, where you are not Oscar Clarke. You are just Oscar Clarke talking about this certain topic today, you know, and that's
I'm not
okay.
the great immortal Oz. I'm a guy who happens to have spent forever. I mean, that being said, I mean, I do now have a bit of a reputation. There was a point when I was at Unity, you could almost call me a games industry niche specific Z-list celebrity kind of thing. I don't mean that in a kind of arrogant way. Just like
Yeah,
I
just like
was
pure awareness, right?
I was somebody, if you knew Unity, I was one of the top 10 people you would have recognized because I was everywhere. I don't mean that in a bad way to anyone else. It's just that was one of those things. And I worked for it. I mean, it wasn't, but that doesn't mean that I was taking on, I wasn't, David, or I wasn't, Joe, or I wasn't, JB. I was one of the people on the team. And I happen to be also bring my own personality to bear, my own kind of direction as an author of somebody who talked about game design, somebody who talked about live ops experiences, and when I think trying sort of one like I really resonates with me with what you said because I've so many people, particularly women, particularly people who maybe not cis white men, who struggle or actually look at public speaking, but also putting their voice out there as something they're deeply frightened to do. That risk of exposure, that's don't want to look stupid, all those kind of things. And I'm talking about people, who are genuinely experts. And even if you're not the best expert, doesn't matter. What matters is you have an opinion based on your experience. If you share that opinion and ask questions, that's a good thing. And it turns out half the time I'm speaking, um, I've been, like I said, pioneering a lot of this stuff. I was when I first did these things, there was nothing to gauge against. We didn't know how you would do online billing for a mobile game until we put a mobile in-app transaction inside a game, and we did that in 2003. I did the first ever mobile in-app purchase, as far as we know. Haven't got any actual proof, but no one so far, Touchwood, has ever claimed otherwise. So I'm happy to say I did the first ever one, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to make rent games, the idea that you would rent a game rather than buy an in-app object, but it was this mechanism that ends up being used by everybody, because it's a bloody great way to encourage people to find good things inside your game. And I think, it's okay if you want to say something. I am interested in this. What do you think? Perfectly valid conversation started to have. And quite a lot of us will have these experiences that others don't know about yet. And how can they learn how to improve what they're doing? How can they know what's possible? How can they know what goes wrong if we don't talk about it?
I'm thinking, Oscar, for people listening to this, I wonder if we could spend some time talking about the two versions of putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And if you feel like there's another one, we can do it. But like for me, the two big ones, at least in the games industry, is LinkedIn and then panels or talks at a conference.
Let's talk about social posts as well, but I like that. Let's start because I think LinkedIn is a flavor of the social post, but it's actually a very distinct one that's very useful. But it's B2B focused. I think if we talk about the sort of social stuff, we can talk about more the kind of B2C and the B2 prosumer side, which I think is an
Let's do
also
it.
very interesting one. So let's start with LinkedIn then. What's your view in terms of like the kind of fundamentals of what makes the LinkedIn post operate?
Yeah. So to be very clear, LinkedIn have publicly said they want to maximize the economic potential between two users on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal of the algorithm and the platform. So, what does that mean? They want people to meet new people,
Yeah,
get new jobs, or learn how to get new jobs, or do better at those jobs.
yeah.
That's what LinkedIn's trying to do. It's actually quite different to a lot of the other social
Mm,
platforms because YouTube is trying to maximize your time on the site and entertain,
yeah.
where LinkedIn, obviously, not everything's perfect, but like they're trying to very blatantly improve the economic potential and opportunity. So, what does that mean for us as a platform? So, most people who've grown up, they looked at LinkedIn, it's the job site, right? If I need to get a job, I go there. So, what has it effectively become? I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. LinkedIn
That's
is
what.
pretty much the place. Yeah, and good reason. LinkedIn is the place to meet new people in pretty much any industry from a professional setting. And by sharing posts out there, it then makes what we just said a lot easier. So when we say what is a LinkedIn post, we have to say, okay, what do we want? So there's a few things we could want. We could want a better job. We could want to learn about the job. But let's focus on getting a better job or getting more clients, which is the two buckets I usually look at. So in terms of getting a new job, what does a LinkedIn post serve? For me, there's three buckets. There's the analogy of a radio. I say this quite a lot and it tends to resonate. So when you listen to radio, there's music, there's banter with Jessica at 10 a.m. making jokes and you can text her, and then there's the adverts, which makes the money. So I try to look at LinkedIn as a radio. So what does that mean? So music for me is we're trying to build authorities, the bread and butter of what you could be posting on LinkedIn. So what is that? That could be breakdowns of something you learned on the stand up yesterday. That could be a breakdown of a question that you received from a client that you keep educating on. Maybe I can put as a piece out there to build authority in the space. It could be a snippet from a chapter of your book, Oscar, about game design, which you keep having to repeat. You're building authority and expertise. If
Yeah.
they're story led, they tend to do better. So that's authority. And then the other two parts which people tend to miss is the banter, which is building trust in the human. And there's a bit of a like, it's funny because I speak to a lot of founders, and during onboarding, they say, I don't want to look like that. I don't want to be me, me, me. So there is a balance here. I think the balance is you want to share stuff that you genuinely believe in, like non work stuff. The example I like to give is when you're on Instagram and your cousin that you haven't met in 10 years gets engaged, you would feel very rude if they posted and you didn't like that post.
I'm just 100%. Yeah.
So if we're on LinkedIn, a lot of people are lurkers, so to speak. So some of our clients have been looking at my content for 8 months, but they've never clicked like because it's just not in their nature. But they would tend to like the announcement post. Is there a celebration of a year milestone? Anything you've learned, even if it's personal, right? If there's a milestone when it comes to the fact that you've moved countries or the milestone of your first chat, it doesn't have to be the thing you want to be known for. It could be something where you're building trust. That is a good 20% of the content. And then finally, which is most of the content we see, it's the adverts, which for me is a convert post. And a convert post is something where we're looking to get an action from people. I'm going to this conference. Please chat with me. That's a lot of what you see. It's like, I'm happy for you. I want more, right? But because we've got the music, we've got the authority content, we have a bit of the human side, they now trust you and they'll probably be a lot more inclined to take the action when it comes to asking for something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what does it look like to ask for something? To wrap this up, it's, for example, hey, we've just got one more onboarding slot. This is how it's like to work with us. If you'd like to work with us, DM me. For me, every Monday, I do a very direct call to action. Either come to an event, sign up here, or, if you want a new ghostwriter, let me know. But it's because I've spent the rest of the week sharing insights, sharing a bit about me. And that's what I see a LinkedIn post doing. And then we want to rotate those three things. And we just want to be documenting our life, not just creating what we think people want to hear. And that way it becomes a lot more sustainable. A lot of people feel like they just need to write every post and it needs to be this amazing thing. It's like, no, you can document the stuff that you are already learning over the last week, year, and making those into LinkedIn posts in those buckets. That's how I approach LinkedIn.
No, I think that's fantastic. I think this idea of, I mean, I'm going to paraphrase, but you're kind of like building authority. You're building relatedness. You're building reciprocation, but you're also not being afraid to make an ask. And I think understanding the balance of that is obviously key to it. I mean, there's a phrase that we often use in generic marketing and in sales as well, AIDA, which is awareness, interest, desire, action. So I think this is a fundamental of communication in general, but also to get to the point where you get a transaction of some kind. I don't mean transaction in a kind of negative sense, just the practical sense. So
Yeah.
awareness,
For me,
without
it's a
awareness,
conversation.
yeah,
Simple
sure,
conversation. Like, we
exactly.
just want to get in the DMs, for example, or meet in
Yeah.
person. But the content might have facilitated that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, realizing that awareness is part of the puzzle. So if people aren't aware of you, if people aren't aware of the message you're trying to communicate, you've got to start with that. You're not going to immediately have somebody trust you if you haven't started with that. But also, I think part of that, like you said about relatedness and that kind of like authority, is that sense of how you inspire interest in what you're doing. Because if you can't garner interest, it won't move to the next stage, which is that sense of desire of what you have to offer, or that connection, or that conversation that you could have. And without desire, people won't take the action. But what's interesting about the action is that unless there's a reason to act now, people won't. You need a level of FOMO, and that's not me making that up. That was a guy called R. Bauer, who in 1960 wrote about consumer behavior as risk taking. And this seems to consistently come up every time I do analysis on gameplay behavior, whenever I do a thing about like monetization design, but even just things like setting a podcast. Unless you create a reason to act, to come and join us now, it's very hard to get people to commit. Humans have things to do. So there is an addition I add to this stuff, though, which is really important here with the kind of process, and very much what you're doing, Harry. retention. I think if we think about Ada as a transaction, we turn that into something longer term, a partnership or a community, when we consider retention. And I think that's really what we're making a promise of if we're using LinkedIn effectively. Now, I'm not saying I do. I mean, I've got like 14,000 or so, 15,000 people on LinkedIn, but that as a result of spending, 10, 12, maybe even 15 years as an evangelist, traveling the world, talking to tens of thousands of people. However, it's not a bad number, but it's not that engaged an audience quite often. I know people who've got much fewer audience potential reach than I do, but seem to have much more engagement than I do. But maybe that's partly because I have a certain audience doing a certain niche. And so it's not always easy to judge the effectiveness you're having just by simple numbers. Sometimes it's about the nature of the replies, the quality of those replies. My favorite example of this is we were trying to set up a publisher. We were going to use the name Jetpack Collective. And we got a cease and desist from the lawyers of Halfbrick. So I reach out, find a connection, and the CEO of Halfbrick agrees to have a call with me. I get on the phone, and he says to me, "Oscar, it's okay. I know who you are. I've got your book." I mean, that was magic, and those guys are lovely, absolutely delightful team. They even got me to do a lecture. To be honest, I didn't do a great job of the lecture because I was in the middle of like 15 other things at the time. But the point I'm trying to make here is that shows that if you've got this right, whether or not you're seeing the daily engagement numbers changing, what you really, I think, need to measure this by the impact is that's the word, impact that you have. You go to a show, people say, "I saw you do this." And that unprompted response can be just as important as maybe the day-to-day number. Does that make sense to you?
Massively, because we've got clients who started from 1,000 followers. We've grown some from 4 to 16,000 followers, and we have some who's slightly ticking on. And what you said is very, very important for people to understand. It's very easy in the world we live in now to compare, especially when most people think of Instagram, right? Where it's like 30, 50, 100 likes is not that uncommon. On LinkedIn, it can feel brutal when you see your peers getting 30, 50, 100 likes and your post getting 800 impressions and 7 likes. But what is very clear, what Oscar said, who's watching,
Yeah.
because you can actually control who's watching. And I know this because we have the back end data. So we track all the people who like and comment on the post. And on one of our clients' posts, he's got around 2,000 followers. Like, the people he wants to be talking to is people from Nvidia, Meta, all the vendors. And around 20 to 30% of the people engaging work at those companies, which is great. But if you
Fantastic.
saw all the people who are liking and commenting as a whole, it's around 650 people have ever engaged on the last 2 months. Now, if you think like that, it's like, wow, why are we putting all this effort just for 650 actual individuals? However, he booked a call with one of the most important people he needs to speak to at NVIDIA because that person was reading all the content.
Yeah.
And Oscar managed to get something over the line with the CEO of Halfbrick, which is a very important company, maybe because of, yes, the book he put out there, but maybe he saw him at a conference. Maybe he saw him share that one tidbit on LinkedIn and it stayed up to date.
Yeah.
So people really need to understand how powerful LinkedIn is, where even, for example, of getting a job, you only need one person to notice. And if you want to get a client, you only need one good client to change your entire life.
Exactly. And I think this is absolutely vital stuff. So, and one thing I think is also important there is that how I use LinkedIn may not be the way that other people use it. So I'm using it to reinforce my authority as the expert on the live ops space. Part of the reason by that I do that, by the way, is because most of the work I do is under NDA, so I can't talk about the clients I work with. I'm running the chief strategy officer for a tech platform, that's even more important that I can demonstrate that. But thankfully, I can go into some of the biggest companies in the world, and they already know who I am, and that wouldn't have
Why
happened.
do you think they know who you are, Oscar?
Well, it's because I'm often introducing them on stage, as well as being somebody they've seen putting out a message on a LinkedIn post. But even I think that that's not enough. So not quite sure we're ready to transition yet, but at some point we're going to transition into the prosumer, kind of the broader audience stuff.
Yeah, please. Because I think a big lesson here to remember is just consistency, right?
Yeah.
Like if you make this enjoyable, something you don't want to stop before you get results. An example I've given, I was on a call last week where I was with business owners and I was explaining the value of a podcast. And they said, when should we start investing in so and so? I'm like, the way I've been sustainable with my podcast is the podcast worth doing just if zero people watched and just the conversation was worth it? And it was yes for me because it was really interesting people. And then eventually, my first guest referred me to someone who ended up becoming my first client, and that ended up paying for the video editing bills. But what's important here is if one person saw it and then you had a conversation with them, that would be worth it.
Oh,
And therefore, would keep you consistent despite a bad month, even a bad 3 months, because you know at least one or two people are starting conversations. Now, there's things we can get into how to start those conversations, but I think to your point, Oscar, like it's being consistent and not stopping.
exactly. So, I mean, interesting though. When I first started the podcasting stuff with Game Dev Local, with you guys, and the guys that you guys aren't. But anyway, when we get this video out, anyway, for those who are part of the Game Dev Local community, why do I do that? I don't do that for any money. I don't get paid for that. I do that simply because I just love talking to game developers about making games. I simply adore it. And it keeps me fresh. It keeps me informed. It means that I know what's going on because I wouldn't have the opportunity to otherwise. It means that when I'm next having I'm hosting, say, Pocket Gamer London, I will be having a moderation. In fact, I recently did two of them in. I know there were some things that didn't go great with that, but it was fantastic to have some amazing speakers I got to talk to and interview. And the conversations to me make me better at my job, and that is sufficient for me to want to keep doing it. I just love doing this stuff anyway.
Like people value journaling. No
Yeah,
one reads the journal.
yeah,
So I think why not do this outside? Whether it's hosting a e-coffee, maybe recording the call and sharing the lessons
yeah.
instead. Now it's a podcast. It's
Now
not
it's
that
about,
different.
well,
Yeah.
that's what a podcast generally is, I would argue. But then I've gone further recently. I've realised that for this new role, I wanted to go the next stage, and also part of the work I'm doing for the next book. So I interviewed 27 of some of the best game economy designers I could find who were willing to chat to me. Not everybody's willing to chat, not because they're not willing to chat, but because they don't necessarily want to go on record, and sometimes they're not allowed to go on record.
Sure.
So I'm lucky enough that I got to speak to some really great people. That's going to start coming out hopefully December-y kind of time, I think. When we're still working out when.
You
Um,
say you recorded them, like
yeah,
they'll
yeah,
end up
we've already
recorded.
recorded them. We just haven't really. I recorded some of them nearly a year ago, because it's taken
Nice.
a
That's going
while
to be
to
fun
get.
when it comes out.
Yeah. So the 27 of them are ready to roll out. We're going to use it as part of the pre-warm up of the release of the book, but I'm not going to stop there. It's a different format than I usually use. It's much more detailed in terms of game economy design, but what was fascinating is I was able to leverage the information in those conversations to reinforce my own opinions on game economy design. It forces me to question my own assumptions and allows me to have a broader response when I start thinking about describing it. So when I'm talking to someone like Ty Kelly, he has a slightly different framing to how he approaches game economy design than I do. When I talk to, say, James Portnow, I'm still hoping he's going to let me have a what's it called? Anyway, his podcast. So I'd love to get on that as well. But anyway, my brain is suddenly frozen on that one. But when I talk to him, we get to explore things like gun game, and I get to point out to him that the idea that the person who lost gets the best guns actually predates that work that they do with Call of Duty with a guy called Mark Smith who currently works at Nvidia, who did a mod for Quake. So conversations like that remind me of the stuff that I know, and then allow me to apply that, and also challenges me in areas I feel weaker on, and gives me other areas to explore. That alone is worthwhile. But hopefully, the information that people will get by listening to that is a depth that really gets a kind of sense of what's going on. Really what gets a sense of what's happening in the space. And I think that's useful for the industry as a whole, because the more we talk to each other, the more effective we'll be at our roles.
For sure. Exactly. A big part of what we're talking about today is, I think, facilitating conversation with other people in the industry and upskilling ourselves. And then the butterfly effect is very real. You speak to one person, they might give you a tidbit, you might end up talking to another person. And these things, if you look back at your life, like how much one person may have changed the trajectory if they weren't there,
Mm.
like I think it's just very important to have more of that. I really truly think that most of everyone's problem can be solved with another conversation with someone else. So it makes it really important to make sure that we're proactively doing that.
But there are also other techniques you can apply. So the conversation, I think, is really useful. The technique I'm currently using, my lightning lessons, I'm trying to build up snippets because one thing I know is I talk a lot, and not everyone's frequency of engagement is an hour-long podcast. And I think that's okay. So we're basically doing a sort of 60-second snippets. The idea being that I can take one part of one of the interesting components of what makes a game design work or a live ops experience work, and I can summarize that in a very short, punchy framework, which is memorable. And that ability to be able to communicate those things in those smaller bite-sized snippets means that you can create longer formats of engagement, but broken up into individual, more repeatable pieces. And importantly, it's not a huge burden to make them, provided you have depth of knowledge to bring to bear. Now, I happen to have that, thankfully. But I think it's been a really interesting lesson starting to apply them not just to LinkedIn, but on Instagram, on TikTok. I'm using Blue Sky. I'm currently not posting them to X. I was, but X started charging for the third-party tools to use to post. So
Sure.
I'm not that worried about X at the moment, but that's another subject. But what I'm finding is it's interesting to see the kinds of content that gets the most impact. If you're doing a short or a reel or a TikTok, you're getting more eyeballs than you might otherwise, but less depth of engagement. But I'm still getting something like 13-second average view on a 60-second piece. To me, that's pretty damn good, given that I would expect most of the TikToks to be around 3 to 5 seconds. At least that's the kind of engagement I've seen from trailers, for example.
Are you trying to get a outcome from those shorts? Are you trying to point them to a longer piece of content?
It's not necessarily. What it is I'm trying to do it as a here is I want to be considered. I want our organization, to be considered the place you go to, like you said about kind of owning a space.
Yeah.
If you are in this area, I want you to think of me as a place to find good information. I want you to think of me as a place where you can find trustworthy information. And by having this regular, repeatable, consistent, 3 times a week video update on lightning lessons, that's then supplemented by other videos and other pieces of information
Is it on the same channel?
on the same channels, on all the
Yeah.
same
So I feel like
channels. Yeah,
this is then serving that purpose.
yeah,
I've learned this lesson, like every kind of little bite-sized piece of content, the ultimate goal of that is to drive people for the more in-depth, longer form of content. So for me on YouTube, I track the main outcome I'm looking for is a subscriber, because they might stick around and watch a bigger podcast.
yeah,
And YouTube shorts and reels, they do get that. They get more followers, then they stick around. And like you say, some people may have never found you if it weren't for that short. And the same thing for a LinkedIn comment, for example. A lot of people have done content in the games industry saying that they get 10,000, 20,000 impressions on a comment. Maybe I should just do comments. It's like,
yeah,
well, wait a minute. Are you building the same sort of relationship when someone reads your comment versus a LinkedIn post?
exactly.
But the LinkedIn comment can make people view your profile, then stick around for the good stuff.
Yeah,
So it has its place. But like for me, the shorts and the LinkedIn comments are a way to drive to the bigger thing. So I'd always caution people to not get blinded by we have more bigger number here. It's like, yeah, okay, but let's like what's the main thing you're pointing them to, right? Is it the
yeah.
podcast? Is it a LinkedIn post?
And
All
you
that
said it
stuff.
earlier. What's the payoff? What's the
Yeah.
where is
Do
the
we like number go up or are we looking for a conversation? Because if it's number
exactly?
go up, cool. That's a different game we're playing. That's completely fine. But
Yeah,
for most of
exactly.
our clients, they just want conversations and authority with their partners.
Exactly.
So
And what I'm experimenting with, and I don't think I've got the answer to this yet, is what happens when you put the same information across multiple platforms. So far, it seems that we're getting more interest, but whether that turns into something useful or not, we're yet to see.
Say, is this the video reels?
These are the video reels and the TikToks and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely. I think the way I see it is the content is king, and then you're just deciding which marketing channel to
yeah,
deliver it on.
exactly,
And sometimes, if we become media companies, we might decide to edit the type of content for
exactly.
each platform and make it more applicable. But for example, for me right now, I have YouTube and then Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and that's pretty much it. Eventually, once I love to understand it, I'll go into TikTok more and then Instagram more. But I feel like to do that, I just want to, I guess, level up and get better. Maybe this is me procrastinating here, but I just see them
Just
as
do it.
communication channels.
I mean,
Yeah, just
an experiment I'm having in my fun times, the things I do in my spare time. I do a couple of actual play things. One is an actual play where I get people to play, and the other one is I interview other people who do audio dramas and actual plays, and I do that
cool.
purely for my own self interest, and it's fun. But what I found interesting about that is taking 60-second snippets and making them short. In fact, less than 60 seconds in some cases, making shorts and reels and TikToks of them makes it really interesting. And although it doesn't necessarily show clear feed yet, because we're still very early days in it, I definitely getting the sense that we're getting attention. And
I mean, I can show you what's
mm,
possible
yeah,
because
yeah,
I don't know if we can share screen, but on LinkedIn, they've added a new stat,
mm-hmm.
which is the amount of people who've clicked the link. So
Yes,
every time I post a podcast reel, so I put a lot of my budget into making the podcast trailer good. So you can go on LinkedIn and people will be like, oh, what's that? Then watch the
yeah, yeah.
podcast. And the second part is the fact that on YouTube, it will hopefully perform better, even if it's shown in 3 years, for example.
No, I think
And
that's great. Yeah, actually that's something I don't do. I should do more of.
it's
Um,
expensive though. And
yeah.
oh my God, like the amount of mental energy to get to that point
Well,
takes
that
time.
being said, I'm very lucky that my son is a film editor. That's how
Hell yeah.
his degree in that.
Hey,
He actually
I have a
works for me.
perfect. I have a podcast statement of process, like how to make the trailer. I might send
Yeah.
it to you because it took us a while to get there.
Please do, because
Um,
my son's very good at this and does a great job of it. So
I might
I'm
have to
very
hire him
lucky. Yeah, yeah.
if he's got time. I might
I'll
basically.
sub him. At the moment, I'm trying to get him. He's doing all of with the trouble. The trouble is because I've got these fun things to do. I'm half of his time is me paying him to let me make my fun things possible without taking up
Mhm.
my daytime because we have a lot to do as a startup. You don't want to
Of course.
distract me from that. But I
Would
find
it,
it
be, would it,
I find it useful to have the distraction to stop me from
it
just
gives you your soul, like it
it gives me
restores the soul,
exactly
100%. Like
100%.
my girlfriend's a DJ, right? So I always try my best to attend her gigs, even if it means losing sleep, because what else am I here to do? I need to support her. So like that
Absolutely.
thing supports like the soul and the people you're working with. They probably really enjoy your presence as well. So I don't think there's
No, exactly. It's all
everything has
good
to be
stuff.
business.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I think we've said here is that we're talking about creating a body of work and finding the right channels for that body of work. That
Yeah,
there's a functional element to that body of work, which is about building authority, about building relatedness, and about building this sense of reciprocation, but not being shy of having an ask in that
yeah,
process
and
because
ultimately a conversation.
it's got to be a conversation. Exactly. In fact, it's interesting. I find that some of the most successful ones are the stupid little ones where I'm spinning, hi, I'm in this airport. I'm just about to go to insert country, insert conference.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying very much in those videos, but they seem to get more views than anything else.
I can tell you why. Like
Go
we
on
have
then.
the data on why. It's mainly because the dwell time of a post is one of the key factors of whether LinkedIn should share it more.
Yeah.
So if you have a very long post with a very long dwell time, so the amount of time it's on their screen, then LinkedIn, it's almost like the retention time on a YouTube video.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you posted a 30-second short and people watch the whole thing, it's a good short. So if people clicked the link, they're scrolling LinkedIn, they find that post, they click see more, they read it all, they might even like and then move on. Then they're like, oh, this LinkedIn post wasn't completely scrolled over. We might as well keep showing it. So
Makes
it's kind
sense.
of similar to what we said about the comments. Like it's just easier for LinkedIn to put that in the feed because they know it's not going to be like, oh my god, a big waste of their time.
Yet again, we're ruled over by the mighty algorithms.
Yeah, and it's just a part of the process.
Yeah,
Can I share one thing for the audience here?
go for it.
Some, so I'm just sharing my screen for anyone listening. I will talk over. So this was the most successful trailer drop we did, and it was all organic.
With
And
Bobby. Oh, I love
yeah, this
Bobby.
Bobby podcast.
He's awesome.
So I'm going to mute. And the cool thing I want to show here is I'm not too crazy on the copy here. I just basically explain what's in the podcast, click the link to watch the podcast, and it's a trailer.
Yeah.
If I look at the analytics here, this just kept on going viral. I think just people spent a lot of watch time on it. Now, if I look here, I had 43 people click through to my profile, had 8 people follow me, and the watch time is ridiculous.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
So
That's awesome.
I have 40 hours of people spending time.
Yeah.
And then this is my favorite part. 255 people clicked through to watch the pod. 22 people sent it to a friend, and 65 people saved it for later.
Yeah.
So what does this mean for me? Why did this post quote unquote perform? Not because of this. It's because on the back end, people were doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're posting something that actually get people to click through and find out more, if it's a piece of bigger content you're pointing to, or if just genuinely useful information and they want to save it or send it, that will make it go far. So it's almost to the people listening here, if you're going to be putting yourself out there, if it's something that people generally like, oh, this is net new information, thank you for sharing, it will do so much better versus a kind of rehash of like top 5 tips you found on GBT. Like that small difference of, will this be something that's useful? Should I share this in my internal Slack kind of thing? It will then just give you, doesn't matter how small your account is, because we've had other clients who have 10% of my followers get similar results because the content itself was really interesting.
So that's fantastic, and I think, by the way, if you're looking at like other tools, so for example, I'm using Metricool as my kind of posting system. That lets me see the analytics from LinkedIn, from Instagram. It doesn't currently do Blue Sky ones, if I remember correctly. But anyway, you get a really good sense of all the different channels that you're utilizing. I thoroughly recommend using that scheduling tool. It makes your effort required to do the posting and scheduling so much lower.
The
And
big thing actually, the
yeah,
friction to content. Like
yeah,
if it's big friction and that's the only reason you're not doing content, reduce the friction. Like
honestly,
I recently found out I could cross post to
yeah,
Instagram, and it was my first post on Instagram. I was like, why haven't I done this feature? And I know why I haven't done it because I couldn't be bothered to copy paste. So like these little tools
exactly.
make a big difference.
It's just, I mean, putting it into a schedule, being able to have it go all the way across all the platforms is easy, and you can go into each one and
Do
customize
small
as
tweaks,
needed.
exactly. Yeah.
However, I don't, because I'm lazy. So you'll notice I've stopped using ats and I just use hashes, because hashes work everywhere, whereas ats only work on the specific platforms, which is annoying, but that's not the life. Anyway, bottom line, as we come to the close of the kind of like the conversation, what is your kind of like one thing you think people should take away from this discussion?
Great. Honestly, if someone's listening to this and they hear what we're saying, they want to put themselves out there more, reduce the chance of failure by defining what is a success and also what is failure. Because if failure is people think you're silly, there are things that you can say which no one will think you're silly, which is your story. If you share your story and how it helped you and a lesson to your former self, that is the ultimate shield. And I promise you, because I've seen it happen over and over again, the thing that you think is silly or old news, someone else reads that and it's like, oh my God. And then something clicks. Maybe you've inspired them, even if they've heard that message before. People need reminders more than they need lessons.
Yeah.
Like we're living in such an information age. So if someone's thinking, what do I have to say? Like honestly, there is such a shortage of content on LinkedIn because I see across the whole industry, very few people post frequently. You obviously only see the content that's out there. So if I could say one piece of advice for everyone here is honestly start. Like it's completely changed my life. It's changed many lives of the people that we work with. It's just putting yourself out there. Like at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think LinkedIn is actually very, very powerful, but the thing to remember is that about half the people who should be on LinkedIn aren't. And a lot of the reason they aren't is because they have in their heads, like you said earlier, Harry, the idea that this is just a job page. Look, LinkedIn shouldn't be a social platform, shouldn't be all these other things. And I think what they miss is the thing you said right at the beginning, that actually the purpose of LinkedIn's algorithm is to make it so that the individuals engage with each other have a net productive function,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. And I think that's fundamentally different. I'm not saying there's any moral, improvement with LinkedIn versus other things. Although I have found people are increasingly using LinkedIn like I used to use X or Twitter, as we would prefer. I love calling it X because it is the former social network. It is the X social network, as far as I'm concerned, which is a pun that I think is lost on Elon. But I do use Blue Sky. I tried using Mastodon, didn't quite take off for me. The point is that there are you will have audiences where they are. LinkedIn, it has an audience, and a lot of people are on it. There are people who still use Facebook. I've stopped using Facebook, and I still have to go back on because I have friends who haven't come off it yet, and it is the only way I can talk to them. And that's okay. I mean, that's just reality. If you're using Telegram because you're a tech bro who loves blockchain or Signal or something similar, that's okay. That's the channel you've chosen. That's the channel that audience has chosen. So even if you're not coming at this as I'm going to take over the world and I'm going to corner this amount of money, don't have to have that mindset. Even if it is, I am going to make a space for myself, then work out what that space is. As LinkedIn is a very powerful space to do that, and it's a lot easier in some ways to do that without any weighted aftertaste that can happen with some of the platforms.
Yeah, and the good thing about LinkedIn is people tend to be quite nice. Relatively speaking, almost infinitely nice.
Well, I hate to use a kind of bad analogy, but you don't shit where you sleep. It's like
Yeah.
it is where,
People actually think before they type.
and if you are a professional and you want to be employable, you want to be seen as employable. So why not use the place where people find people for jobs, but also for, I mean, I extensively check what people's current roles are. I use LinkedIn as my memory. I cannot remember 14,000 people. No one can. Check
Yeah.
out the
It's
Dunbar
like the
number.
modern Rolodex, right? That
It
actually updates.
is, but I think it's more than just a. It is literally. If I had the kind of Meta glasses or the Google Glass type thing, where I could actually take your facial recognition and remind me where I met you, that would be transformational. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand the issues, privacy, blah blah blah, and all that kind of stuff. I get that. However, it would change my life. My point here is this: there's no harm in telling people what you do and how you do it. In fact, it's a good thing. In fact, if you want to have an impact, then actually it's an amazing opportunity that you have to be able to start talking about things you care about. It's also an amazing place to find out more about the things you care about. And what I call active listening is not quite the usual definition. I go out and talk, not just because I like the sound of my own voice, because I want to see the reaction. I want to see who agrees with me, who disagrees with me. I want to understand where I've got it wrong. And I won't get that right unless I say what I think, because how can someone correct me if they don't hear me say it?
Very well said. Very well said.
So that's why I do it. It's partly because obviously I'm trying to build up a business, partly because I want to build up an audience, partly because I want to reinforce my authority. But I love the fact that Harry, you had nailed it. It's also part about I'm a human being. I'm not just a hat.
And you want to learn. Like you said right at the end, like even if nobody's watching, the one piece of feedback that might change
Yeah.
your whole. It's like the little stuff that really do add up. So it's yeah, it made me inspired to start journaling again. I had that 5 minute journal and I stopped. And I should start now that I think
I've
about it.
never been good at that. ADHD boy here. I can't do that kind of stuff consistently. Harry, it's been fabulous chatting to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If people wanted to find you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Great. So you can please connect with me on LinkedIn. Be happy to chat. Find me at Harry Foku, spelled Phokou. If you want to check out the podcast, thegamingplaybook.com will take you to the podcast page, and then you can go and check out the latest episodes there if that's your fancy. But yeah, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, Harry. And for those on your podcast who want to find out about me, I'm Oscar Clark. I'm very easily foundable. In fact, I'm Googleable. Google Oscar Clark Games, you'll find me. No, I'm not the American guitarist or the Canadian cyclist, but basically you'll probably find me pop up at the top. My socials, I use my old D&D character Athanasius, Athanateus. Athanasius is a ridiculously bad handle to have in the modern age, but at the time when QuakeNet existed, it was awesome because it means immortal, basically undead, immortal kind of mindset. Anyway, but you can find me through socials that way, and this, of course, is also going to be on the Game Dev Local podcast. So you can check out the Game Dev Local podcast where we have a bunch of hosts, including me, not just me, talking to a community of largely indie game developers.
Love it. Awesome. Really glad we did this. Finally.
At last. We've been trying to do this for ages. Harry, thanks a lot. Great talking to you, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. Later, everyone.
Bye.